Cursed be the ground for our sake. Both thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for us. For out of the ground we were taken for the dust that we are, and to the dust we shall return. The From the Dust podcast features people who have had life-changing experiences. Here they share their stories and testimonials about how God can move and change a person's life. Welcome to the From the Dust podcast. Take a listen. Open your hearts and ears. Here's your host, James Science.
Hello, and welcome back to From the Dust podcast. I'm your host, James Science. And whatever you are, whatever you do, hope you're highly favored and highly blessed. If you have a story or testimony you would like to share, go ahead and hit the From the Dust podcast at outlook.com. That's From the Dust podcast at outlook.com. Stories need to be told and voices need to be heard. Well, today, my guest, she's here to share her story and testimonial about spending 25 years straight in prison. She gets into where she was supposed to do life. But by miracle, by the grace, she's out and she's here to share her story. Let's go ahead and bring her in. Sheena, Renee, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
It's good to have you on. I'm thankful for you wanting to share your story and spending your time with us here today. How's everything going today? How are you today?
Today is good. Today's a blessing. Woke up today, so you're already blessed when you're waking up.
I got not a joke, but I always have a saying when people ask me how you. I was like, well, I'm good. I could have woke up dead if that makes any sense. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And I'm free, so it's definitely a blessed day.
Right? Yeah. We'll get into that. Like you share your correspondent that you spent 25 years in prison, which is I can't even imagine. We'll get into that, but before we get into that, can we talk about where you grew up and how your childhood was?
I grew up in a Pentecostal family, actually, with some minister church family. However, I had an outside family member. I was sexually abused as a child. And so from a very young age, life became tainted. But as I grew up, I got probably about 11 years old. I got introduced to drugs and alcohol. And I started dealing with life through that way. And very angry with God, very angry with any adult in my life because of what happened in my childhood. When I turned 12, I was almost 13. I was in my first drug rehab. And actually, when I went to drug rehab, I learned about more drugs I didn't know about before I went to rehab. So unfortunately, that wasn't the best place for me. I came out. I ended up going back to my mother's house, which did not fare well because I was so angry from my childhood that I met a man, and by the time I was just turned 15, I married him. He was almost 21, and he supplied drugs and he did things like that, and he was very emotionally, physically, sexually abusive and physical. And by the time I was 17, I was in prison for being accessory to his death.
Well, and that's where I'm hearing. That's where your journey begun of spending 25 years.
Yes, that's where my true journey began. When I went to prison, I was very angry. It was still for me mentality, and I was definitely very angry with God. Because here now I had this life without parole. I was actually sentenced to death by incarceration, which means I was to die behind those walls. And, being raised how I was, I thought I was going to hell anyway. So I was just going to make sure I had a great time going before I went. And so even when I got to prison, my first 10 years, I did everything in prison that you hear about: drinking the hooch, do the drugs, doing all the things that you're not supposed to be doing. And in 2004, I took a class. It was called Impact of Victims of Crime. And they should have it in every state, but it gives you the the view of your victim's feelings. And that class changed my life, was the first turning point.
Now, I've spoken to a gentleman who's been in prison on this show. I don't know the differences. I never really been in a prison. My dad sent me at a young age to Scared Straight, and that was just an hour or two, getting just a
Right.
taste of what can come. What were some of the hardships and trials in and in prison? Is it similar if you heard stories to a men's facility?
Men's facilities are more violent, although women are violent. When I first went back, I went in 1992. I had just turned 17, and thrown into adult prison. And back then we called them old G's, old gangsters. And those were people who were really involved in the gang life. And those were the type of people that were in prison. Now it's a lot more, they throw people in prison for the slightest things. But when I first went, it was scary. It's Orange is the New Black is not exactly what it's like. People ask me that question all the time. It is demeaning. You are told what to do every single day. As soon as you walk through the door, you're strip searched, squat, cop. It doesn't matter if there's 15 people in the room. So from your first day, you walk in, life is never going to be the same. And to go through those trials and tribulations of learning that everything you do is now under the control of somebody else. When you go to the bathroom, when you wake up, when you go to bed, it's a hard thing to take in.
Well, just I think I learned quite a young age that wouldn't be the life for me. Not that I'm scared, just know that it'd be difficult, and it's a fight for survival for many. If people don't really see that, some people they glamorize the movies, all these prison movies, and they say it's going to be fun. But yet there's it's a fight for survival for many. Am I right?
Yeah, I mean, when you go in there, you have to learn to hustle from the get-go. Unless you've got money, people sending you money, you're learning to either wash tennis shoes or, scrub something, do something to create a hustle. In the women's prison, we learned to crochet and do all these other little things. In the men's prison, they learn tattooing and, selling drugs. And you actually, unfortunately, when you go to prison, you learn how to commit more crimes and what not to do because what somebody else got caught with. But the men versus the women, it is a lot more violent. Women are more dramatic, and you don't have as many stabbings in the state that I was in that you would in the men's prison, nor the rapes. But the mental of it is difficult because you have somebody like coming in that might be 21 years old telling you to scrub the floors because they didn't like how you did something that day. Sometimes their power gets abused.
I would imagine. Now, are you? I want to backtrack if it's okay. Are you comfortable talking about why and what led you to get there? And because you said that you were a tribute to this person's death. Are you comfortable talking about that?
Yes. As I said, for 2 years we were married, and he was quite older than I was. He controlled every aspect of my life. Money, if I wanted to go do anything, I had to have sex. The sexual was not always consensual. It just became almost like being raped every day in my own home. He would show up at people's house with a gun. He would threaten my friends, my family, when I would take off and try to hide. If you don't tell me where my wife is, I'll kill you too. One of the last actions that we had with him, actually, he took me out to the woods to a very shallow grave and said, if I killed you, nobody would even notice, because I ran off a lot because I was always trying to get away. I finally got divorced, and the divorce didn't even work. I did restraining orders. I did all those things that people are supposed to do. But in the 90s, domestic violence, I remember showing up one day with a black eye and somebody said, well, what'd you do? It was, what did I do to get that black eye? Or, oh, you probably should have blacked her other eye. Maybe she'd listen better. And it was almost a joke to people because people didn't know how to handle those situations. And a couple days prior, my co-defendants actually had went and stole some of his guns. And so 2 days later, when we went down there to his house, it came to a place of robbery or different things. And I remember thinking, I just want to be free. And so we were high, we were drunk, under the influence, and people ask me what happened a lot, and I only remember vague, or I think I remember, because I was so intoxicated. Sometimes I can't remember if that's what happened, or did I read that in the media, or was that what I was told? Like, my mind has blocked a lot of it. I know what the media said was not completely truth. They definitely do what they can to sell a story. And that's partly what helped me get out later, was that the truth did come out. But we went down there, and my new boyfriend at the time shot my ex-husband, and I was there. And 2 days later, I was arrested.
Now, you say you're 17 when going in. What were you feeling? What were your emotions, knowing that you could spend the rest of your life and even die in prison?
People are shocked to hear that when I went to prison, I finally felt free. I knew that nobody was going to hit me anymore. Nobody could sexually abuse me anymore. Nobody could, I had these people that they were guards, but I almost felt protected, that, and I mean, not that I didn't get in bad relationships in prison and stuff happened, but I knew that, and when I was in county jail, I was actually raped by a cop, that they covered it up for 17 years. And it came out, and he finally went to prison 17 years later. But for the first time, when I walked on that prison yard, I felt free. And I felt I had escaped all the abuse, finally. So
you must, yeah, for someone to feel that way and think that way, their life outside had it been, a nightmare. And I'm glad you're able to talk about that, because not many people share, and because there's a lot of people that are going through this right now. What was the pivotal turnaround? You obviously didn't live a life. You just lived a life of survival, and you, due to circumstances, you had to do what you had to do. And people get to that place. I understand, whether it's right or wrong, but people, it just happens. People make mistakes, accidents happen, or whether it's a fight for your life. How were you able to overcome life in prison, and how were you able to turn your mindset and your life around?
Well, in 2004, I took that class, and that was the first part of my turnaround. And then in 2007, people kept inviting me to church. And actually, I was complete opposite. I actually, people walked around with "What would Jesus" t-shirts on, and I ordered one that said "What would Satan do?" I was just the rebel of against all rebels, because I was angry. I was angry at God. I was angry at everyone. And one of my people, I was contemplating suicide, because I thought, I don't want to live here no more. And I went to church that day with a friend. I said, if you'll shut up, I will go. So I went into church that day, and that minister said, there's somebody sitting here, and you're thinking about taking your life. And God said, it's not your time. And I knew he was talking to me. It was immediately. And I tried to run out of the church right when that happened, because it was a little freaky to me. But I couldn't move. I was cemented. And until I walked up front and turned my life over. And it didn't happen overnight. I could feel something different, but within 2 months of getting saved, they made me a facilitator over the ministry in the prison. And I thought, I'm not qualified for this. And I remember somebody telling me, God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called. Yep. And that's exactly what he did. And so I started turning everything around, and people started seeing me different too. They were like, whoa, this is Sheena. What in the world is going on? Because I was that wild girl, and I became from the party girl to the prayer girl in church. And so I started a ministry in there, and it was called Fired Up, and almost 2,000 women got saved in a year. We used hip hop, stomp dancing, rock and roll. We reached them in a way that you could reach people who were broken, because the most broken people are the ones in prison. There's good people there that made bad decisions. They're just broken. And so I thought, even if I have to spend the rest of my life here, there's a reason. And I'm going to let God use me. And so every day I got up, I knew my place in that world there was to help somebody not come back to prison or to change their lives. And so that became my focus every day while I was there.
I admire that. I like your mindset, how you used but your circumstances, but still you still use it for the good and you still use it for the glory of God. What let's talk about how you were able to walk out a free person, knowing like we mentioned, knowing that you 25 to life, death. What was it, and what do you think that you were? What let's talk about what brought you out. What was it that?
Well, it was a miracle in itself.
Yes.
That was a miracle because man said never. And I remember one officer even told me, the only way you'll leave out of here is out of a pine box. And I remember when I left that day, they say, what officer do you want to walk you out? And that was the exact officer, because I wanted what he said to know. God was letting me out, But in 2012, Miller versus Alabama was a law where juveniles under the age of 18 could not be sentenced to life without parole. So that opened the door. Well, as that opened the door, my co-defendants also recanted. They also told about the police told them what to say, because you got to remember, I'm from a very small town, and it's so small that some of my jury members went to church with my victim's family. So they said I was guilty until I proved my innocence. I had 2 of them on my jury that said that. So it was already tainted from the go. And so all of those things came into light as well. The rape that they covered up, that came to light. So it was like all these little small things got me out. And there was a 2-week window where they said retroactive or not retroactive. And I still have a lot of friends that are still there that are under the same law and should have been released. But my lawyer said if it would have been 1 day before or 1 day after, you'd still be there. So it was a pure miracle I walked out.
God's timing, and sometimes we got to get. Sometimes I understand life has its way and has journeys, but yet our actions and our ways lead us down to those places. But people always ask, why does God allow things to happen? Well, we have a free will, and that's just our actions get us there. But we learn lessons through them. God teaches us the hard way sometimes, and we got to learn through the pain. What are you able to do now that you're free? And what do you do now to help better yourself and help better others' lives?
Well, when I first came out, I wanted to leave everything about prison behind me. I just wanted to move on with my life. And but then I started going through struggles. I started struggling every day, PTSD, coming out to a whole new world. Even the slightest things could affect me. A banging door, intercom, things that reminded me of prison could set me back. And so once again, I lost myself. But not too long ago, I said, okay, God, I was being Jonah. God was telling me what to do, and I was like, no, I don't want to do that. I'm done with that. And so of course nothing worked out. Just a few weeks ago, I looked at my boyfriend and I said, prison did not break me. And all of a sudden I was like, that's it. People come out of prison like me, struggling all the time, not knowing what to do in a new world, because families don't know what to do. So I started a group, and it's called Prison Did Not Break Me. It's a Facebook group. It's now becoming a nonprofit organization. And what we're doing is we are helping other people who come out after incarceration realize, 1, they're struggling. They're not alone. It's perfectly normal. 2, we want to help the families who don't know what to do with their incarcerated loved one coming home. Like, how do I help them? How do I not be a trigger for them? Instead, I help them. So now I'm spending all my time helping people that's coming out of prison, coming out of addiction. I have spent weekends at people's house detoxing them, getting them off drugs, getting them back cleaned up. Anything I can do to help them not go back to prison, that's what I do now.
That's awesome. I like how you said that you referenced Jonah. Like God allowed that whale to swallow Jonah
Yeah.
He did it. He did it to save him. He didn't to like he did it so he wouldn't drown. So that prison and terms was your will, and God allowed God for His ways. It happened for you because who knows what happened to you if you would have not been incarcerated. You could have lost your life, or he's could have been.
I would have been dead.
Wow, yeah.
Well, and I tell people all the time, you know, I go through struggles because I love how people you always say that saying. My test is my testimony, my mess is my message. And you know, when I was younger, I thought, why did God let me get molested? Why did I get raped? Why did I go marry this man that abused me? But like we say, we have free will and we have choices. However, when you go through those struggles and you allow God to help you overcome, you're going to help somebody else that's at the bottom of a pit in the ashes and pull them back up. And because we're not here alone, and sometimes you got to go through something else because you might be the mother to the next Billy Graham, you know, and you just never know who it is that you went that struggle to help that person through their struggle. It's all connected. And people get really, I used to be like that. God, why are you letting these things happen to me? And I let that anger me. And then I realized if I let it not happen to me, but happen for me, for the glory of God, it will change the world.
I like that. Oh yeah. What a journey. What a story. For I always allow before we go and before we end, I always allow the guests to share their heart and story. For the ones that are listening, I mean, man or woman, but I hope the women who are listening right now that are possibly going through it, have been through it, that haven't seek the advice or seek the help, or just are looking to kick. What kind of hope, what kind of message and words can you give them for them to cross that line, to step that boundary, to get the help, or to better their lives?
I always say it's never too late to be who you were meant to be. I love that quote. And if you are in a relationship where you've lost yourself, you're not supposed to be there. If you're in a relationship that's abusive, there's a way out. And some people cannot see that way out. They get so trapped because usually abusers keep you trapped. But my advice is seek help. Find somebody. It doesn't matter if it's just the smallest blink of an eye of help. You have to know that you can have better, you deserve better, and you're worthy. And there's a better plan for you than what you're living right now. If you're living imprisoned in your mind, you can be set free.
Man, I agree. Wow. I appreciate you, sharing
Thank
your
you.
message. Not many people have the willingness or the boldness. Some people have some crazy, I've talked some crazy stories, but they are too afraid because they don't believe that their words or their life can help somebody, or they can't relate. Again, for the ones listening and watching, if they're looking, they want to seek help or guidance, where can they find you or any of you work so they can make that next step into recovery and to just bury their lives?
If they always remember Prison Did Not Break Me, we got prisondidnotbreakme.org, Prison Did Not Break Me on Facebook, or prisondidnotbreakme@gmail.com. They can definitely email us and get in touch with us. And we're always looking for volunteers too who are wanting to help other people as well. So we're hoping to spread the message. We got 700 members in 2 weeks. So that let us know we had a need for them. There is a need.
Again, for the ones that are listening and watching, that's prisondidn'tbreakme.org. And Renee, we want to thank you here for your time.
Thank you.
And I pray that the ones that are listening and watching are blessed and they hear this. For you that have a story or testimony you would like to share, go and hit me with From the Dust podcast at outlook.com. That's From the Dust podcast at outlook.com. Stories need to be told, and voices need to be heard.
Therefore, if any man be in Christ, he is a new creature. All things are passed away. Behold, all things become new.
Y'all be blessed. Stay safe. from the Dust Podcast.